Kia ora tātou.
Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Kennedy Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year's budget is essentially more of the same. A traditional neoclassical budget in a time of national austerity. Let me critique it from a green perspective and offer an alternative ecological budget in a time of global crisis. The 49th Parliament has passed 224 acts in 30 months. These reflect the government's worldview to make New Zealand a better place as it sees it. What stands apart in importance for every government, every parliament, is the annual budget, which sets the course for a country's macroeconomic policy. The two overarching issues in every budget are: how large is the national pie and how do we slice it? How large is the economy and how do we share in its product? Government policy hugely influences how large the pie is. How much the country produces, how much it trades and under what conditions, how it controls debt, what exchange rate it maintains. We measure the size of our economy by GDP. We compare ourselves with others through our relative GDP ranking. We are relatively well off here in God's own, yet in our abiding provincialism we compare ourselves only with OECD countries and harbour neurotic fears and compulsions as a result. We fall about, arguing over catch-up with Australia. Yet the New Zealand pie is relatively large as humanity goes. How we slice the pie is the secondary issue for the government, the question of social policy. This addresses taxation, employment and labour, health and education and social welfare. Add in law and order and we have the general picture of our society and how government sets out its strategic direction in the budget. Political debate among our parties traditionally reflects the left-right spectrum: large or small government, high or low taxes, more or less benefits, how much expenditure and how to spread it. Whether the annual tilt is towards defence or aid, towards health or education, prisons or community service, youth or the elderly, towards research or subsidies. The annual budget addresses these left-right issues. The two major parties forming successive governments in New Zealand over the past century revolve around the centre of the horizontal spectrum, centre-left or centre-right, spinning a helix of mild variation around the Western worldview of the past 2 centuries. The 2011 budget is no exception. The centre-right government of the day, facing economic and financial pressure, seeks to recover the good life by regenerating growth through reducing government, making welfare leaner and meaner, incentivising the private sector with lower tax and more support for entrepreneurship, and further opening the national economy to the global market. The budget is designed, through a rather touching faith, to retrieve material prosperity in the 21st century through 20th century economic policy. The year's topics of choice for debate are KiwiSaver, working for families and student loans. Labor, for its part, critiques the budget through polar opposite argumentation, while retaining the identical prescriptive and analytical framework. It too wishes to see regeneration and growth. It criticises smaller government, opposes tax cuts and shouts in anger over welfare cuts. It would nonetheless concur with a reinvigorated private sector and an open economy plugged into the prevailing neoliberal global economic grid. So opposition and government share the same worldview of how to grow the national economic pie, differing over how to slice it domestically. Both worldviews are born of a bygone age. Their philosophical beliefs derive from the 18th and 19th centuries: the freedom of Smith and Paine, the equality of Rousseau and Marx. And their economic policies derive from the 20th century: the market forces of Marshall and Friedman and the state custodianship of Keynes. So this government's budget and the alternative Labour version revolve around the same economic paradigm. I do not hold these beliefs to be irrelevant, but they are secondary in today's world. For the past few decades have seen the birth of a new political philosophy and a new economics. We're not talking simply about the social movement known as environmentalism to be tacked on to the current political agenda. We're talking about a new political agenda, a complete change of worldview, a new age, the age of sustainability. We're not talking about smouldering resentment and a protest movement. We're proclaiming a transformational mindset and a reform ethic for governmental management. Where people once yearned for political freedoms or social equality, they yearn above all today for a healthy planet. Where movements once embraced declarations of the rights of man, they now embrace the Earth Charter. I do not declare the left-right spectrum to be irrelevant, but it is now secondary. Superimposed over it is now a vertical spectrum, sustainability versus collapse. Without sustainability, freedom and equality are unattainable. In this new age, our institutions are failing in a time of need. Governments pay lip service to sustainability, but they do not understand its import or magnitude. And our parliamentary procedures, locked into 19th century tradition, fail to assist. Where are the budgets that address the real problems of our time? Land deforestation, land deterioration, water scarcity, ocean degradation, biodiversity lost, atmospheric pollution. Where is the global budget that identifies the safe operating space for humanity, the 9 planetary boundaries, the ecological overshoot of the planet's resources, the global energy imbalance, the need for carbon emissions to peak by 2017, and the switch to a low-carbon economy by 2030? And how is our national budget to reflect these global concerns? Where in the Minister's statement is there recognition of these concerns and how to participate in a coordinated response? Where is the budget that begins at the beginning with population growth and density around the world and here in New Zealand? Does this budget consider our national ecological footprint? Does it identify whether we have an ecological surplus or deficit and how this might relate to the needs of the world? Does the budget incorporate as its central objective the taming of climate change through contraction and convergence and a genuine price on fossil fuel? Does it embrace a worldview before it asserts the national interest? Or does it assert the national interest without much of a care for the rest of the world? Mr. Speaker, the world's problems are our problems. The fate of the earth will be the fate of New Zealand. Our destiny lies not in seeking a false competitive advantage, but pursuing a genuine cooperation with other nations for our common survival. A green budget rests on this philosophical premise. A green budget recognises first the global population growth within a lifetime from 2 billion to 9, a global density growth of 13 to 45 per square kilometre. It recognises the current 50% global ecological overshoot and rejects this as a moral outrage against other species, an irrational act of human self-destruction. A green budget takes as its major goal the preservation of our natural resources in perpetuity. It recognises that human success lies in ensuring that economic activity must be undertaken in harmony with nature's bounty and must cease if it crosses certain thresholds, rather than simply patch up the damage. It estimates our national population growth and our need to account for the greater number. It identifies as its main criterion of success the index of human well-being, in which mortality and health, education and crime, and the integrity of the environment are integrated with traditional indicators of GDP, interest rates, unemployment, current account balance and debt levels. A green budget aspires above all to attain sustainability. How we measure this is not an easy task. It is a work in progress and we have only just begun, but we shall get there. My Sustainability Indicators Bill in the ballot would impose an obligation on the Finance Minister to develop a budget along these lines. It would not be content to countenance an Environmental Reporting Act and debate on the environment separate from the budget. That leaves the traditional approach to macroeconomic policy supreme and environmental concerns secondary. It needs to be the other way round. This government, this budget, is more of the same. A green budget would turn the ship of state around before it is too late.
Tim McIndoe.